By the way, don't believe that technology is going to take away human beings' jobs. Technology is going to replace a lot of stupid jobs. When the first technology revolution comes, the steam machine comes, people worry, oh my God, steam machine is going to take away a lot of jobs. After 50 years, the steam machine created more jobs. When electricity comes, a lot of companies worry about losing jobs. But electricity created so many jobs. Artificial intelligence, they will create more jobs.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this section we're going to start looking at Tkinter, and we're going to be using Python 3. I know that most of you are already using Python 3, but for this section it is especially important that you use Python 3 because it has all the latest Tkinter updates. Use the latest version that you can. In this case I'm going to be using Python 3.7. 3.8 has just come into a beta, so I'm not using it yet, but what we covered in this section should work for Python 3.8 and later as well. As I said though, I'm using 3.7 and I recommend you do as well. In order to create a project in PyCharm using Python 3.7, I'm sure you know how to do that already. I'm just going to create a folder for my project, and I'm going to call it GUI development. Make sure to not call your project Tkinter, as that is going to conflict with the imports later on. And then for the environment, select a new environment using pipenv, and then make sure the base interpreter is Python 3.7. Alright, that's everything you need in order to create your project. So once that's done, we should be able to use Tkinter. To verify that Tkinter is working in your system, all you have to do is create a file inside this project. Name it whatever you want. I'm going to call it test.py, and in here type import Tkinter. Now, if as you are typing, PyCharm has this recommendation, that means you're all good to go. That's the first of all. But just to make 100% sure, after import Tkinter, type Tkinter underscore test, like that. Now PyCharm will complain about this, but that's okay, and we're going to run this file, and you should get a little window that looks similar to this. If you get anything at all that isn't an error, that means you're good to go, but you should get a little window that is essentially a sample Tkinter app. If that happens in your system, you're good to go. You can continue into the next video. If it doesn't, you'll need to go through installing Tkinter. Now, that is fairly straightforward in most systems. All you have to do is reinstall Python or install a late version of Python, like 3.7, and make sure that tktcl is selected in the install. And you shouldn't have to worry about it on Mac and on Linux. It should all just work fine. Thanks for joining me in this video. Let's get started with Tkinter. I'll see you in the next one.
Cannabis is very fast to enter the bloodstream. In fact, within 30 seconds, it's going to enter the brain and permeate throughout the brain and body. That's very, very fast. I mean, when you contrast that with something like alcohol or even nicotine, depending on how the nicotine is delivered, that is a very fast delivery of the psychoactive and biologically active compound.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to start learning about Tkinter by building a simple Hello World app. What to do is right-click your folder and create a new Python file. I'm going to call it app.py, as I usually do for these smaller apps. And we're going to do import Tkinter as tk. This is a aliased import. It's essentially the same thing as we did last time, only now instead of tkinter.stuff, we're going to do tk.stuff. So this just renames Tkinter into tk, so it's a little bit easier to use. And this is something that you'll encounter in Tkinter code all the time. However, we're also going to use a submodule of Tkinter so frequently that we want to import it separately as well. So we will do from Tkinter import ttk. Now, Tkinter has had a bad rep in the Python community and generally in everybody's minds for a long time because it has been not the prettiest to look at. It is a little bit confusing and generally it hasn't been all that good. And over time, people have migrated to other graphical user interface libraries. In the last few years, Tkinter has gotten much better, and with the introduction of TTK, as well as many other improvements, it is now what I would say is the best option for learning graphical user interface and developing cross-platform interfaces for your applications. In addition, Tkinter is very fast, and it's not that difficult to learn once you've got a few fundamentals down. So let's get started. We're going to create a simple function called greet, and it's going to print hello world. So nothing new here. If we call this function in our code and we run app.py, as usual, you will get hello world printed down there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a button inside a window, and when you click the button, this function will be called. So the first thing to do is to create our Tkinter application, essentially a container for all our other components like buttons and texts and things like that. Usually call this the root. So you define it by creating a tk object that comes from the Tkinter package. Then you can give this a title. This will be the title of the window. Finally, if you do root.mainLoop, that is going to run your window, and the program, the code will be paused in this line until the window exits. So whenever you run this, your entire Python program comes to a standstill, or so it would seem, while Tkinter is in its event loop. Let me run this, and actually I will call the greet function underneath this line as well to show you what happens. Now I'm going to run app.py, and you'll see this little window appear, which doesn't contain anything. The window may be different sizes depending on your screen and so on, but you can see down at the bottom left that there is no hello world being printed out. That is because right now Tkinter has taken control of Python. If there were buttons or labels or input fields in this application, they would all work because Tkinter is the one controlling them. But the rest of our application is stopped. So we cannot run any alternate code at the same time as we run our Tkinter code. If we stop this, then hello world gets printed out and our application ends. Now, when we're defining Tkinter applications, we're going to wire the different components, such as buttons, to functions in our code. That is how our code runs. So let's do that just now. We will create a greet button, which is a ttk.button. Notice that this is not a traditional tk.button. It is a themed Tkinter button. This is the new type of widgets that allow much more customization and is one of the reasons why Tkinter is better now than it used to be in the past. The first parameter to any of these components is who the parent is, or where the button will go inside of. So this button, we want to put it inside the root, which is our main container. So that is the first argument to the constructor. Next up, we can give it some text, which is what will be contained inside the button. And finally, we can give it a command. And this is a callable function that will run when the button is clicked. So here we're going to put our greet function. Make sure to not put the result of calling the greet function, as then it would run immediately and you would get an error. You do want the function itself in there. Now, when the button is clicked, this command function will be executed, which will run your greet function. Next thing, we're going to put this button inside our root, because if we run this just now, you will see that the button is not in there. The root is the parent of the button, but we've not placed it in there yet, so we need to give Tkinter some information as to where we want this to appear. And we're going to tell Tkinter that we just want to put the button in the screen wherever it fits. And for that, we use greetButton.pack. And we are going to give it side of left fill of x and expand equal true. Now that we've got this, we can press play and you'll see the greet button appears and expands as you make the window grow. That is this fill x and expand true in action. We will explain more on them later on. As you click the button, hello world appears on the bottom left. We also have this greet call down here. We're going to remove it now since we don't need it anymore. Next, we're going to create a quit button. And this is going to be another TTK button, also on the root. The text is going to be quit, and the command is going to be root.destroy. Again, make sure to not call root.destroy like that, because that would actually terminate your application. Root.destroy is the function you call when you want to preemptively destroy your application when an interaction happens. Next, we also have to pack this button into our root, so we will say quit button.pack, and we will say side equal left, fill equal x, expand equal true. So the same thing as before, and now we can press play, and you can see that both buttons appear here. You've got your greet button that prints hello world, and your quit button that makes the application terminate. Again, I understand that pack can be a bit confusing. We're going to look at it in detail in the coming videos. Don't worry about it. We have created our first Tkinter application, where we can print hello world or we can terminate the application. We have learned about creating buttons, creating the main container window, and linking commands or functions to our buttons. These are very important fundamentals of creating Tkinter applications. Thanks for joining me in this video. I'll see you on the next one.
Do not try to memory things hard and more, because computer can remember things hard and more than you. Do not try to calculate faster, because computer can calculate much faster than you do. So try to be creative. Try to be innovative. Try to be constructive. These are the things. Everything you learn, you think about, is this thing can make me more creative? If this thing can make me more innovative? If this thing can make me more constructive? Let's do it.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to take our Hello World app a little further, and we're also going to add entry input fields. Input fields will allow us to retrieve data from users, let them input some stuff that we can then use within our functions. Let's get started. First of all, we're going to create our label and our input field. So we will say name label is ttk.label, and we will pass in the root and some text. We will also then pack it into the container. We will say side equal left, and we're going to say pad x equal 0, 10. What that does is it adds a little bit of spacing on the right side of the label. This one being the left side of the label and this one being the right side. So you can imagine that it is adding 10 pixels to the right of the label so that when we add another item beside it, it will be slightly separated. Which it is going to be the name entry. That is the item that we're going to add beside it, and that is ttk.entry. We're also going to put it in the root. We're going to define the width, and we're also going to say where the contents of this field should go. So whenever we type anything into this field, we want to be able to then use what's typed inside the field at any point. To do that, we will say text variable, and we're going to say user name. Now, of course, we do have to define the username variable, which we don't have yet. Here is where Tkinter differs from traditional Python code. In order to be able to get the contents of this entry field, we have to define a place in Python where this field can write to, and that is going to be called the tk.stringvar. A string var is just an object that is used to track the contents of these entry widgets. Essentially, it contains a string, and that string will always be whatever is currently typed in this entry. Next up, we're also going to pack it by saying side equal left, and we're going to say name entry dot focus. Focus is what you call on a particular component in Tkinter so that it appears focused on the window. Let me press play here and I'll show you what I mean by that. You can see now that the field has focus, it has the blue outline around it, and you can immediately type on it. Now, if we were able to somehow inspect the contents of the username variable, you would see that it contains the string Jose amongst other things. Let's close this for now, and I will create a greet button. We have created now our button as well, and that is just as we had before, something in the root with the text greet, and the command is this greet function up here that is currently empty. So to fill in this function, we're going to say print, and in here we're going to say hello username, which is this variable here, dot get. Dot get is a method that we call on these string var objects to retrieve the contents or the string contents of the variable. All right, so let's run this. Now, because all our components have been packed on the left, they all appear side by side. This is how side equal left works, and we're going to learn more about packing in the next video. So I'll type Jose here and then type and click greet, and you can see that hello Jose is printed out. Now, in order to make a little bit more of this, instead of username.get, we can type username.get or world. And what that'll do is if username.get does not return a value, or rather it returns an empty string, we're going to type hello world instead. So you can see that hello world gets printed out at the bottom left. So we've learned a couple more things in this video. We have learned how to create labels or just static text, as well as input fields or entries in our Tkinter applications. And we've also learned how to store the contents of those inside our own variables. And finally, we have learned about pad X and also its counterpart, which exists, pad Y, to add extra spacing around any component. I'll say at this point that pad X can be used on any component whenever you use pack. So you can put it here or here, and that would also add spacing around these components if you want. In pad X, the 0 is the left and the 10 is the right, and in pad Y, the first one is the top and the second one is the bottom. So thank you for joining me in this video. Hope you've learned something, and in the next video we're going to look at pack. I'll see you there.
So now the technology comes. This new technology will also create a lot of successful people, interesting careers. But honestly, every technological revolution comes is going to create a lot of social problems. And my view is first technology revolution caused the First World War. Second technology revolution caused the Second World War. Now we're on the third.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video we're going to learn about pack. Pack, you can think of it as putting the components in the window where they fit, given that they adhere to certain constraints that we give it. Pack can be a little bit confusing and a little bit unpredictable at times. This is why in this video we're going to explain how pack behaves by giving you many examples. Let's start by creating a couple of labels. And here I'm using TK labels as opposed to TTK labels, just because we don't need the themed or the styling of those labels at this point. So we're going to put two labels in the root. Okay, here we have two labels and we have placed them in the root. Now, if you remember correctly, whenever you run a code like this, you won't get anything in your window because you've not packed the components into it or you've not placed them. I'll say at this point that as well as pack, there are other algorithms for placing components in the container, but we're only learning about pack in this course. Let's give these labels some text. So I'll say label 1 and some background, which will be green. And the other one is going to be text equal label 2, and the background is going to be red. Then we're going to pack them. So the first one we will pack on the left, and the second one we will pack on the top. Let's run this here. You can see that they appear side by side, even though one has been packed on the left and the other one has been packed on the top. So what does side mean? Well, you can think of side as the anchor point to the component. And what that means is that this component, label 1, is glued to the previous component or the window by the left side of it. By contrast, label 2 is glued to the window on the top and not on the left. You can see that that happens as you expand the window. The label 2 keeps being stuck at the top, but label 1 is stuck on the left. As the space expands, label 1 has no knowledge of vertical distance because it is glued on the left, so it always stays in the middle. And label 2 has no knowledge of vertical distance, so it stays on the left, as close to where it originally appeared as possible. Next up, let's use fill. So we will say fill equal y and fill equal x. Let's run this again. And now look at what happens. We have filled on the y-axis the left label. And that means that it now takes up as much vertical space as is available. So the background, and indeed the entire label, spans the whole vertical space. Similarly, label 2 spans the whole horizontal space, or as much as is available, but there is a gap here where the green label is. Because the green label was added first, it takes priority. So it fills on the y-axis first before label 2 has a chance to expand. If we do the other way round, putting label 2 first, then you'll see what I mean. So now label 2 is glued at the top, label 1 is on the left. As we expand this, you can see that label 2 now takes up the entire area because it takes priority. It was put in there first. Let's go back to this. Instead of x and y, we can do both. And here is where it starts to get interesting. So we've got both of these labels here, and as we expand, you'll see that nothing happens that is different from what we had before. That is because even though these labels have a fill that tells them to take up all the available space on both x and y, there is no available space on x and y. This label here only takes up this much space horizontally, and this label here only takes up this much space vertically. That comes to mean that you can only fill a label cross-axis. So if it has a side of top, then you can fill it in x. And if it has a side of left, you can fill it in y. Unless you use expand, and we're going to learn about that in just a moment. Now, if you remove fill both from one of them, then this is what happens. The label stays in the middle of the axis that you told it to. It doesn't have any knowledge of the vertical spacing, and indeed it doesn't take up that space. However, the space is still reserved for it, so this label cannot span into that. Now, let's use expand. So we'll do fill equal both and expand equal true in just the one label to show you what happens. Now that we've got expand equal true, what that does is it requests from the container as much space as possible so that the other containers don't shrink past the minimum content width. So this is a little bit confusing, but essentially label 2 still gets to keep the space it needs to show its text. Label 1 takes up all the other space. And because it has fill of both, then it takes up the entire space there. Notice that if we say fill only on Y here, now this label is still taking up all of the space, but the component itself is only taking up as much of the Y space as possible. The rest of the space is still reserved for it, but it is not being used. Next up, let's make both labels side top and both labels with fill both and expand true. Now what happens is that both labels are stuck to the top of the previous element. So label 1 is stuck to the top of the container, label 2 is stuck to the top of label 1. And in both cases, they're going to take up as much room as possible, and they are both requesting all of the space. In that case, it gets shared 50-50, so both labels will fill in the y-axis as they would normally because side is top, and both labels grow on the x-axis because they both have expand equal true. Whichever side comes first gets the expansion priority. We mentioned this earlier briefly, but let's create another label in the root with text of label left, and the background is going to be green, and we're going to pack it on the left with expand equal true and fill of both. Now these other labels are going to stay on top with fill both and expand true. And I'm going to make this one red as well. So if we do this and we press play, you'll see that the side of left gets the expansion priority and takes up all of the horizontal space. And these labels here are only taking up vertical space. That is because they have a different side and they were placed afterwards. If you do it the other way around, you'll see that now the opposite happens. These labels take up all the horizontal and vertical space, and this one is left with basically nothing. I would recommend that you play around with a lot of these different examples. It took me a long time to fully understand what's going on with these before moving on. Finally, something worth mentioning in this example is that even though this label has a side of left, it still appeared underneath these other labels. And that is because when you anchor a label and give side of top, it takes up the whole vertical space available. Anything after it will appear underneath it. Similarly, when you give a side of left, it takes up all the vertical space, and the next element will appear on its right. So this is what happens when the first element has a side of top. And again, going back to the previous example, if you have a side of left first, this element takes up the entire vertical space and all future elements appear on the right. So this element took up the entire vertical space. The next label appears on the right, and it takes up the whole horizontal space. So the next label appears underneath it. So this one has also taken up the whole horizontal space. So if we have another label top, it will also appear underneath it stacked. But what happens if we add another left? Well, because the previous label has a top, this one also appears underneath. So the label itself's side is irrelevant where it is placed. What matters is what previous elements had as their sides. Okay, so now if we put another left, given that this previous one has a side of left, you'll see that it appears here. So this one took up all the vertical space, then this one took up all the horizontal space, then this one takes up all the horizontal space, then this one takes up all the vertical space that's remaining, and this one appears next beside it, since there is no more vertical space to go around. So as you mix and match these spaces, essentially the distribution changes, but what matters is what the previous element had as their side. if the previous element had a side of left or right, if it has one of those two, then that takes up the whole vertical space. And if it has a side of top or bottom, it takes up the whole horizontal space, and the next element will appear accordingly. Please, again, do play around with these, play around with expand, fill X, fill Y, and with different configurations of these labels to really grasp how Pack works. And if you have any code snippets that you don't understand how they work, do put them in the course Q&A, and we will be more than glad to help you understand them. Thanks for joining me in this video. Hope it's been interesting and you learned something, and I'll see you on the next one.
You don't need college to learn stuff, okay? Everything is available basically for free. You can learn anything you want for free. It is not a question of learning. There is a value that colleges have, which is like, seeing whether can somebody work hard at something.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn about frames. As you can remember from the previous video, we have 3 labels. 2 of them that have a side of top, and 1 of them that has a side of left. And what that means in practice is that each of these takes up the entire horizontal space. And finally, the label that is with side left has to appear underneath them. If we want different behavior to this, we can use frames to contain certain labels. So let's do from Tkinter import ttk, and as well as the root, now we're going to define a main frame that is placed inside the root. We're going to say main.pack, and the side is going to be left, and fill is going to be both, and expand is going to be true. Now we're going to place these 2 labels with side of top. Instead of in root, we're going to place them in main. And we're going to leave this final label with a side of left. Now, here's what's important about this distribution. The main frame is the first element inside the root. The label is the second element inside the root. These elements affect each other because they're both inside the frame, but they won't affect this one because they're not inside root. So when we do this, we get this distribution, which is different from before. Now, this here is the main frame, and this is the label. Both are side left. Both have fill both and expand equal true. What it means when 2 components are on the same side with the same fill and the same expand is that they're going to share the space equivalently as long as it's possible. So as long as the elements inside them don't take up more space. That means that you get a 50-50 split here. These 2 labels are inside the main frame, so they have a top anchor in both occasions, and they both have fill both and expand equal true, which means they take up 50% of the available space. We create frames in Tkinter precisely to do stuff like this, to group together components that we want to affect each other but not other components. By using multiple different frames, we can achieve the layouts we want. Pack is a very powerful and very flexible algorithm for putting components into a window, but as you've seen throughout the last couple of videos, it can be a little bit confusing, and also depending on the size of your window and also on the order in which you put elements, things can change in how it behaves. This is why there's other algorithms as well, as I've mentioned before, but we won't be looking at them in this course. For most simple applications, to get data from users and to show them data back, Pack is a perfectly valid and useful algorithm. And it is very simple. You just say Pack, which side you want, and whether you want components to expand or not, and there you go. You don't have to worry about positioning or grids or layouts and all of that. Hopefully this makes sense. Thank you for joining me in this video, and I'll see you in the next one.
I always tell people that you can call me anything that you want. You can call me Arnold, you can call me Schwarzenegger, you can call me the Austrian Oak, you can call me Schwarzi, you can call me Arnie, but don't ever, ever call me a self-made man.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video I wanted to talk with you briefly about the project we're going to be building in the next few videos, and it is this text editor you see here. In this text editor we can type, we can see the saved or unsaved status of any element, we can create new elements using that or a keyboard shortcut, and of course we can save files and they get written to the disk. And we can also open files so that we can edit them with our text editor. It may look complicated, but there's actually a lot of different Tkinter components here working together that make developing something like this fairly straightforward. We're going to develop it in just a few videos, so let's get started in the very next one. I'll see you there. Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video we're going to be creating our notebook, and this is the start of our text editor. Let's create our notebook. So we'll say notebook equal ttk.notebook and put it inside main. Next up, let's say notebook.pack, and we're going to type fill for both and expand equal true. What this is going to mean, since this is the only element inside our main frame, and the frame is also doing fill both and expand true, it means that this notebook is going to take up the entire window. By the way, notice that these pack methods don't have a side. That means side top by default. So let's press play in our app, and you'll see something that seems like nothing. That is because we have created a notebook, but we haven't created any files inside the notebook. Let's do that now. We'll say text area equal tk.text, and we will put it inside the notebook. Text is different from entry in that text is a text area, so it takes up more room. It takes up some vertical space as well as horizontal space. Notice that the entry fields are just one-liners, text are multi-line. Then we will pack it with, again, fill both and expand equal true. And we will say notebook.add text area. And the title is going to be untitled for now. All right, let's press play. And you'll see that we are here. We have created our text area, and we have now a full width, full height element. Pad of 1 means that there is one element of padding on the left and the right. Pad y of 4, 0 means there is 4 of padding on the top and none on the bottom. You can get rid of those if you like. Next up, what we're going to do is notebook.select text area. And what that's going to do is, as soon as you press play, that is going to be selected, which is the same as before. However, when you create multiple of these, you want to select the latest one you created. So what we'll do is we're going to put all of this here inside a function, which I'm going to call create file. Now we can run create file down here, and it will create the same thing that we had before. But if we run create file multiple times, then we will always have the last one selected. This is going to be useful because when we create a new file using our menu or something like that, we do want to select the file that we've just created. That's why that's there. Alright, so this is how you create a notebook, which is a collection of tabs with different elements inside it, and how you create text areas to put inside each of the tabs. Notice that you don't have to put text areas inside these tabs. You can put whatever you want in them. So potentially this could be a way of creating a tabbed menu if you wanted. That's everything for this video. Thank you for joining me. Let's move on to the next one, where we're going to be adding a menu so that we can create more files. I'll see you there.
Ellie.
That's what you deserve. You're a fucking loser. Because if you actually wanted it and you actually tried, you'd have it. You could have anything you want. Universe is super giving. You want a fucking Ferrari, you can have it. You want that bitch, you can have her. You can have anything you want on the planet. There's not a girl I look at that I want that I can't have. Not one. That's my reality. There's not a car I can't have. There's not a house I can't buy. If I want to go to a yacht, if I want to go to Antarctica, there's nothing I can't have. Bam. Because I've decided to become this man. It's the same for absolutely every single one of you at home.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be adding a menu bar to our application so that we can create new files using it. Let's get started. First of all, we are going to add a couple of things here to our root. A title, which we don't need for a menu, but nonetheless it looks good. And then we're going to add an option, which is a slightly confusing part of Tkinter, but essentially through these options you can change the behavior of certain elements and certain things in different operating systems. Really, you have to read the documentation for each option in order to understand what they do. But when you add an option, then Tkinter will communicate that to TK and TCL, and the UI will behave differently. In this case, we're going to add a tear off of false. And what that means is in some operating systems, the menus we'll be adding can be torn off from the interface and placed elsewhere in your screen. And we want to prevent that. So the menus that we add to our application, you won't be able to separate from the application window. That's what this option means. Now underneath main here, we're going to add a menu bar. And that is just a tk.menu. It's not a TTK menu because it's not really a themable widget, it's just a menu bar. And again, this menu bar will be different in each operating system, it will look different. For example, in Mac, it will show up here at the top of the screen. In Windows, it'll show up as file and so on. And in Linux, it'll differ depending on the distribution. Then we're going to say root.config menu is menu bar. And let's remove those spaces there. And what this means is we have created a menu bar, which is, PyCharm, file, edit, view, all of these things are one menu bar. Now we have to add a particular cascade or a particular drop-down of elements. So we're going to add one called file. So we'll say file menu is another TK menu, but now the parent is the menu bar. And we'll say menu bar.add cascade, and we'll pass in the file menu, and we'll pass in a label called file. And what that does is it creates a file element inside the menu and tells the menu bar, which is our main menu, to add it as a drop-down that you can click. Then in the file menu, we're going to add a command, not a cascade. And the command is going to have a label of new, and the command is going to be create file. Make sure to not call the create file function there, just like we had with buttons earlier on. This command is just a callable function. Oh, by the way, we do have to specify that this is a menu item that we want to add to the menu bar and not an element that we want to add to an already existing cascade inside an item. Just make sure to pass in the named argument there. Running the app now gives you the same thing that we had before, but now you can see at the top we've got a file menu that we didn't have before, and in here we have new. Whenever we click new, we run the create file function, which again creates a text area, makes sure that it fills everything inside the notebook, adds it to the notebook itself, which creates the new tab, and then selects it, which places focus on the newly created element. Again, if we type here, hello world, and then we create a new one. This one is still here in the middle. This one is now at the end, and it's the one that's selected. All right, this is how you create menus in Tkinter. First of all, you create a menu bar, which is the top level that contains all of the different menu cascades. And then you create different cascades, one for each group of actions. That's everything for this video. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you in the next one.
Typically, I would think, well, if you knew what to do, you could just do it. But that's not the case. It's you have to believe that you can do it. And the only way I can figure out to get more people to believe that they can do it is to show more people who are super normal or in fact below average doing the damn thing.
Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be taking the contents of one of our text areas and we're going to be saving them and putting them into a file in our system. Let's start by creating a function that will do that. So I'm going to call this save file. And what we have to do here is we have to ask the user where in the system they want to save the file. We're going to do this first of all so that we know that they actually want to save it, because they can always press cancel, and so we know where the file is going to go. So we'll say file path equal file dialog dot ask save as file name, all one word, which is not very nice, but nonetheless that's how it is. And make sure that from Tkinter you import file dialog. This file dialog here is going to ask the user using the system dialogs where to save the thing that you want to save. So let's go ahead and, before continuing with this, just to show you what it looks like, add an element to the menu that will call this function. So down here in the file menu .add command, we're going to copy that, but instead of new, we're going to call this save, and the command is going to be save file, and again, make sure to not call the function. Let me run this app here, and I'll type hello world, and I'm going to go and save. And notice that we got a few things going on. First thing that we got was an error, or seemingly something that looks like an error. It's actually a warning. And what it says is that somewhere in your system, there is an ambiguous way of calling this dialog. So you don't have to worry about that at all. That's just a problem in my system. You may not even encounter this issue. And the second thing is that you get this dialog. This is a Mac dialog. In Windows and in Linux, it'll look different. And here you can save as a specific name, and you can give it tags. This is just a Mac thing, and you can decide where you want to save it. Now I'm going to press cancel, and that's it. So this is what our save file function does for now. But note that it only asks the user for the file name and the location. It doesn't actually perform the saving, which we do have to do. So we're going to go ahead and import OS at the top, and then we're going to try to get the file name from the file path. So we'll do os.path.basename, and we will pass in the file path. Given a path such as, for example, /users/Jose/file.txt, os path basename will give you file.txt. If you're using a Windows style path, it'll also work with that. So this is a great way of ensuring cross-platform compatibility. Next up, we're going to get the currently selected text widget. Remember that we can have multiple tabs in our system. So by selecting the current one, that is the one that we've just tried to save to our computer. So let's say that text widget is equal to root.nameToWidget notebook.select. Now this does a few things. First of all, the select in the notebook is something that returns the widget name of the currently selected pane. Now you can pass in a tab ID, and then what it does is it actually goes and selects a particular tab. But if you don't pass in a tab ID, which we're not doing, then it's going to give us the name of the widget. In Tkinter, names can be used to uniquely identify particular widgets, such as text areas, notebooks, frames, and so on. So by getting the currently selected widget, we're then going to use the root, which is the main window, to turn that name into a widget. This has to be called on the container of whatever widget name you are getting. Then we're going to perform some pretty ugly black magic. We're going to say that the content of the text widget is text_widget.get, and we're going to go from the first line and the first character. So this is the first line, it starts at 1, and the 0th character, which is the first one. So just before the first character, we're going to go until the end of the content in the widget. However, due to the way that text areas work in Tkinter, if you do from 1.0 to end, you're going to end up with an extra new line character at the end, just because that's always there in these widgets. There's always an empty new line character at the end. So what you want to do is you want to go to the end, except for the very last character, which is always this new line character that you didn't add yourself. So we do end -1c for end except the last character. All right, so now that that's out of the way, we can go ahead and actually open the file path, and we're going to open for writing as file, and then we will do file.write content. Okay, next up, we're going to add an except, and we're going to accept for attribute error and file not found error, and we're going to just print an error message, save operation cancelled. And then we're going to return. So if we close the window, or we didn't get a file name, or the file was not found in the system, then we are going to print save operation cancelled, and we're going to return. Otherwise, we're going to, of course, save the file into our disk, and then we're also going to say notebook.tab, and we're going to pass in a tab ID, but there is a special tab ID in notebook tabs, which is current, and that selects the currently selected tab. And here we're going to pass in a text of file name. And this file name here is what we extracted earlier, and what this is going to do, as you might imagine, is it's going to rename the current tab so that the name of the tab will henceforth be file name. Let me run app.py just to show you everything we've done in this video. And here we have our first empty file that we created using the create file function. I'm going to call it welcome to our text editor. Then I'm going to go ahead and save this. And what's happening when we do this is, first of all, we ask where we want to save. So I'm going to save it as test.txt in my desktop. And then a bunch of things happened all in one place. First, we got the file name, which is test.txt, from the path that the dialog gave us back. Then we got the current widget, which is the one that we have selected at the time of saving. We got all the content. We opened the file using just good old Python, and we wrote the contents into the disk. And then at the end, we renamed the current tab so that it is now no longer called untitled, it is called test.txt. So hopefully that makes sense. We have done quite a lot of work in this video, but most of it is just normal Python. And there is a few Tkinter use cases, like asking for a file name, getting a particular widget, this piece of beautiful code that gets you the content, and then, of course, renaming a tab. So thank you for joining me in this video. I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.
We don't just take other people's risk, meaning take other people's money to run our business, but we take the risk ourselves. Not that we want to worship money or that money is all there is, but it is a scoreboard for a game that a lot of people are playing in this society. And I think it's interesting to try to get in those rooms. And these days, those rooms are open. You know, back when we were first doing our businesses, a billionaire didn't write a book or do a podcast
or tweet
or go shake your hand at a conference. That was unheard of. And now they're all around.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be working with opening files. And it's going to be really easy, because all we have to do is ask the user which file they want to open using another dialog like the one we've seen already, get the contents, and then create a new file and put those contents in it. Let's get started by creating our open file. So we'll do open file here, and then we're going to ask for a file path. So we'll say file path equal file dialog, and now we're going to say ask open file name. Then we will do as we did before, we will extract the file name from the path that this gives you. So we will do file name equal os path base name file path. Next up, we're going to open the file with open file path and R as file. We will then get the content, which is file.read, and this reads the entire file. Now, if you have extremely long files, this could present a bit of a bottleneck, but we're not going to worry about that in this course. Then we will add an except, as usual, for attribute error and file not found error, so in case that something does fail, or we close the dialog. Then we will say print open operation cancelled, and we will return so that we don't execute this next piece of code, which is create file. But now we're going to pass in the content and the file name into create file. Let's go back up here to create file, and we will have a content of empty string and a title of untitled. Then here we will replace text equal untitled by title, and we're also going to insert the text in a text area. What we'll do is a text area dot insert. And where do we want to insert the text? That is the first thing that this method requires, and we're going to use the special place end, which will insert the text at the end or at the very last character currently in the text area. Because this text area is empty, we just created it, this is going to essentially be the start as well. And then the content that we want to insert. All right, so this is how you open a file using our editor. Very straightforward. Once again, ask for the file, get the file name so that you can then name the tab that, read the file contents, and then create the file, making sure to pass in the contents of the file and the title. By default, when we create a file, such as what we do down here, we want the content and the title to be these default values, so empty content and untitled. That's why we're making sure that these have defaults, so that when you do insert the content, it is going to be empty, and when you do add the tab, it is going to be untitled, unless we specify otherwise. Finally, the last thing that we want to add is, of course, a way to call this function. As well as new and save, we want to add an open. So we will do file menu.add command. Label is going to be open ... as is usual, and the command is going to be open file, making sure to not call it. Let's run the app, and now we're going to open this file called test.txt that we made earlier, and there you have test.txt. Now notice that you have still an untitled tab at the start. This is a problem that we're not going to concern ourselves too much with right now, but you could check to see if the tab that is currently selected when you open a new one is empty. And if it is, then you can possibly close it and instead create this new one. But as I said, we're not going to do that in this course, just a separate problem that you can fix if you'd like. Thanks for joining me in this video. I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.
One of the secrets to success might be when you see somebody who has more, who is doing better, who has more money, realizing that means that you can get it, as opposed to, I hate them because they have it. If you can flip that mindset, on the other side of that lives nothing but opportunity.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this short video, we're going to be adding shortcuts to our menus. Let's begin by going into the add commands down here and add an accelerator. This is some text that will be shown beside the menu bar as if it were a shortcut. So we will say CTRL plus N. For new, the accelerator for open is CTRL plus O, and the accelerator for save is CTRL plus S. Now, a couple of things is that in Mac, this should be command instead of control, but that's a slightly more complicated problem to make it differ between platforms. So for now, we're going to stick to control only. Now, if we run this app, you will see that something a little bit weird happens. When we press Control S, the menu lights up as if to tell us, hey, you're using a shortcut for something here, but it doesn't actually do anything unless you click the menu and then press Control S. This may not happen in other platforms, but in Mac, this is how the accelerator behaves. So what you want to make sure is that you have shortcuts also set for when you don't have the menu clicked. And the way to do that is anywhere really down here. You can say root.bind, and now we're going to bind some sequence of key presses to the root, which is our main Tkinter window. And what that means is that as long as that window is the one that's selected, these shortcuts will take effect. So the first one is going to be Control-N, and it's really important to surround your shortcut with these crocodile clips and to spell the modifier keys correctly. So Control has a capital C. The dash means that this is an extra key press that you have to type, N, which is the lowercase n. So again, Control-N is what we're going to be typing for the shortcut. And then we are going to do lambda event is create file. Now, important that we do lambda event and then pass in the create file executing. That's because whenever you bind a shortcut, the second argument to bind is a function that must have the signature of, something like this event function, which takes in an event and then does things. That is because you could use the event that has been generated inside the function. In this case, we don't want to use the event, so what we do is we create a lambda function that takes in the event as an argument and then doesn't use it, and all it does is it calls the create file function. Remember that here we are defining a lambda function. We are not executing the create file function. Executing this function only happens when the lambda function itself gets executed, which will only happen when Control-N is pressed. Okay. Next up, we're going to do root.bind, and now we're going to do Control-O, and once again, lambda event, open file, and finally, root.bind, Control-S. Make sure to include your crocodile clips, by the way, and lambda event, save file. All right, now we can run this app here, and pressing Control-S does indeed execute this bound sequence. This is how you can add shortcuts to a particular component. In this case, we're adding them to the root of our application, the main window, and how you can use accelerators in your menus. Remember that depending on which widget is selected at the time that you press these keys, you can execute different functions. In this case, we are binding Control-N to the root, which means that it will always run no matter which element we've got selected. But if you were to bind Control-N, say, to the text field, this text area here, then the shortcut would only run if you have the text area selected, which may not happen at all times. So this is how you can add shortcuts to different parts of your application if you want. Thanks for joining me in this video. I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.
Don't give up on yourself. Don't let anyone draw you down. There'll be bad days. Yeah? Everybody has bad days. People will pull you down. Your own rejections may make you feel bad. But if you don't believe in yourself, then nobody else will.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to start checking for changes. What that means is when we know whether a file has been changed, we will be able to then tell the user that they're about to quit without saving their changes. So it's important that a text editor has this functionality just in case they close it by accident. How we're going to do it is we're going to keep track of the contents of each text field. And when the contents change, then we will mark that specific text field as modified. Okay, so how we're going to do that specifically is we're going to define a variable called text contents, and it's going to be a dictionary. And then what we're going to do is when we create a file, we're going to say text contents of the text area that we've just created is going to be equal to a hash of empty string. So this may look like a little bit of magic, but here's what's happening. We're going to have an empty dictionary called text contents. When we create a new file, we're going to start populating this dictionary. And we will say that an entry for this specific text area has a content of empty string. Now, we're not going to put the actual content in the dictionary. We're going to put a hash of the content. Hashing is essentially turning a piece of data of arbitrary length into a piece of data of specific length. So no matter how long the contents of a file are, when we hash them, they will become a certain length. That's so that if we have very long files, we don't have them all inside a dictionary, we only have a hash of the contents. If the file contents change, the hash will change. So this is just as good for keeping track of whether something's changed or not. So whenever we create an empty file or a new file, that is going to have a hash of empty string. Now, instead of empty string, which is the content, we can just put content in here in case we're using this for opening a file. Next up, we do want to make sure that when we save a file, this text contents gets updated. So in save file down here, we will say text contents of the current widget is equal to a hash of the current content. Now, str of text widget actually gives you the name of the widget, and you can have a look at it when you, for example, create a file. I'll just print str of text area, and you'll see what it does. It prints out a TCL name of frame notebook text. This is just their specific notation. Every time you create a new one, it will have a different name down there, and you can see that it's text2 when I've created a new one. I know that you couldn't see me create a new one, but nonetheless I did. All right, next up, what we want to do is go ahead and implement something that will check for changes. So we're going to create a new function down here, and I'm going to call it check for changes. And all this function is going to do is it is going to get the currently selected text widget. So it will do current equal. And you can remember that we've got the currently selected text widget here when we did root.name to widget. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to extract that into a function. So we'll do get text widget, and it will just return this. So it'll do that and then return text widget. Then in here, we can use that instead. And here we can also use it. All right, so back to our original function. Check for changes gets the currently open text widget. Why does it get the currently open text widget? Well, because whenever you're typing, we're going to be checking for changes. And you can only be typing in the currently selected widget. So it makes sense to only check for changes in the current widget, as you cannot possibly have made changes to another widget. Then we'll get the content, which is current dot get from 1.0 to end -1c. And then we will get the name of the current tab, which is notebook.tab current text. Next up, if the hash of the content is different from what we've got already in our dictionary, that means that it has changed. So we will say if the hash of content is different from text contents str current, then we want to append a asterisk to the end of the file name, just to tell the user that this is currently unsaved. So we'll say if the name -1 is not equal to asterisk, we will say notebook tab current text equal name plus asterisk. All right, so what this is doing is if the file is currently unsaved and if the name doesn't currently have an asterisk at the end, then we're going to put an asterisk at the end. And that is quite normal in text editors, and this signifies that the file is unsaved. Finally, if the name -1 is equal to asterisk, then we're going to remove it. That is because if this did not happen, that means that the file is not modified. So what we want to do if the file has not been modified, but the last character is the asterisk, we want to remove that last character because it is no longer necessary. The last character being an asterisk means the file is unsaved, but because this did not run, it means the file is not unsaved. So we'll say notebook.tab current text equal name except the last character. All right. So I know this is a little bit confusing. This is probably the most confusing code that we will write in this section, but it is to do with adding or removing the asterisk from the file name depending on whether it is unsaved or not. The last thing we have to do is to make sure that we call this function. So we will go down here to our root binds and we're going to do root.bind. And now it is key press with the K and the P uppercase. And the event is check for changes like that. Let's run it. And I'll bring it down here. And you can see that as soon as I start typing, the asterisk appears. And if I remove the H, the asterisk disappears because it realizes that the contents right now are the same as the contents that is got in the dictionary. Now, if I type an H and then I save it, I'll do test2.txt, then notice that the asterisk disappears. But if I type an E now, the asterisk comes back. And if I remove the E, the asterisk disappears because the contents currently in the dictionary is when it was last saved, as we did here. When we did the save file, we replaced the text contents of our widget with the new contents that we've just saved. So this is how you can signal a user whether some of their files are saved or pending saving, so that they don't close this by accident without saving all their files. However, even if you have an unsaved file, you can still close this and it will go away without telling you that you have unsaved changes. So that's what we're going to do in the next video. I'll see you there.
You know, Muhammad.
Hi guys and welcome back. In this video we're going to be asking the user to confirm that they really want to exit if they have unsaved changes. So let's jump right in it. We're going to go and create a new function. I'm just going to create it down here and call it confirm quit. And what this is going to do is it's going to start off as unsaved equal false. And then it's going to cycle through the tabs, and if any one of them is unsaved, it's going to turn this to true. So we'll do for tab in notebook.tabs. We will get the current widget, which is tab widget, is root.name2widget of the tab. And again, we're using the tab name here, and then we're getting the actual widget using the name2widget method. Then we are going to do that the content is equal to the tab widget dot get 1.0 to end -1c, and then we're going to check the contents. So if the hash of the content is not equal to the text contents str of text of tab widget, sorry, I'm actually going to rename this to text widget just because it makes it much clearer what it actually is. Then unsaved is true because they are different. So we can now break. If they are the same, that means that this file is not unsaved, and it should have the little asterisk beside its name. So we won't do this. Next up, if unsaved, then we're going to ask the user to confirm whether they really want to exit. So we'll say confirm is messagebox.askYesNo, and we will pass in a message. You have unsaved changes, are you sure you want to quit? Then we will place an icon, which is the string question. And finally, we will have a title for the window, which is going to be confirm quit. So if not confirm, we're going to return. Otherwise, we're going to do root.destroy, and that's going to close our application. Now, we do have to import messagebox, So go ahead and do that just from Tkinter there. So what this is doing, just to review, is it's starting off as unsaved false, which means that all the files currently open are saved. Then it's going to cycle through all the tabs, getting the text widget, getting the content, and checking it against our text contents dictionary. If any of them don't match, that means there is at least one file that is unsaved. So we set unsaved to true, we break, and then if unsaved is true, then we ask the user to confirm. If they confirm saying that they do not want to quit, that means they click no, then confirm will be false, and then we will just return and not run root destroy. However, if they do not say no, that means that not confirm will be false, so we will then root destroy. Next up, we do have to add a way of calling that function, and we're going to do that with another menu item. So we are not going to run this whenever you press the close button. We're going to run this when you use the menu to exit. So we'll say file menu, add command. The label is going to be exit, and the command is confirm quit. Let's press play. I will type an H, and then I will press file exit, and this is what it asks me. You have unsaved changes. Are you sure you want to quit? And I will say yes. So then it exits. But similarly, if we type H and then we exit and we say no, then that just returns and it doesn't actually terminate the application. Hopefully that makes sense. I am actually going to remove this print from here. Since we're printing the frame names there, or the text area names there, we don't want to do that. So that's it for this video. I hope you've learned something. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.
At what time do you get up normally in the morning?
For me, it's usually about 7.
7, okay.
But I go to bed late, so usually I go to bed around 1 a.m. or so.
1 a.m.
Yeah.
And you start the day with a real breakfast, or just with a coffee, or with a water?
You know, that also varies a lot. I think it's probably true that having a good breakfast is a good idea, but usually I don't have time for that. So sometimes it's made for me, but probably half the time I don't have any breakfast. I had to also have like coffee or something like that.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be closing individual tabs using a shortcut. So let's go ahead and start with that. We're going to create a function called close current tab. So I'm going to go ahead and implement it here. Close current tab. And what it's going to do is it's going to get the current tab. So we'll say current is get text widget. And then we'll do notebook.forget current. Now let's add a shortcut for this. So in the file menu, we're going to add a shortcut for it. So just before exit, we will do file menu, add command. The label is going to be close tab. And the command is going to be close current tab, and the accelerator is going to be ctrl plus Q. Next up, we're also going to add a shortcut. So we'll do root.bind, control-Q, and the event is close current tab. All right, let's run the app and see what happens. So control Q, and the tab is closed. Create new, and it comes back. Of course, if you do create multiple tabs, you can then close them individually. Now, if the tab is unsaved, you want to be able to tell the user that they have unsaved changes and they probably shouldn't close a tab until they save them. So let's do that first of all. We will say if the current tab is unsaved, and they confirm close, then we will do notebook forget. So two functions here that don't exist that we have to implement. So let's go ahead and do current tab unsaved. What this is going to do is it's going to get the current text widget. So we'll say text widget is get text widget. Then it's going to get the content, And finally, it's going to see whether it matches the stuff in the dictionary. So we'll say return hash of content is different from text contents str text widget. There we go. So if this returns true, this tab is unsaved. Next up, let's do a confirm close. So this is going to do return message box dot ask yes no, and it's going to contain the stuff that we have down here. Just going to make it a little bit more generic by saying that you've got unsaved changes and call it close. Alright, so what we've got here now is this logic. If the current tab is unsaved, which means we need to save it, and we confirm that we do want to close, then we will forget the current tab. But there is a piece of logic missing. What if the current tab is not unsaved? What if the current tab is actually all right to be closed? Well, at no point in this function would we close that tab. So we want to do the following, which is that we want to invert this confirm close. If the current tab is unsaved and not confirm close, then we will just return. Otherwise, we will forget the tab. Okay, it's important to test your application and make sure to verify the different scenarios to make sure that you don't miss out on any important logic like we almost did here. Next up, we want to fix another problem, which is that if I run the application and I close this tab, you can see that we've got a pretty ugly window here. So let's create an empty file if we don't have any left. So we'll say if the len of notebook.tabs is 1, that is before we forget the current tab, then we're going to create a new one. All right, let's press play now. And you can see that as we press Control Q, which I am doing, promise, then this stays there. That's because we are creating new ones. Okay, let's press Control Q now, and you can see that we get this message box. You have unsaved changes. Are you sure you want to close? And we're going to say no, and it stays. We're going to press yes, and it goes away, and we get a new one. Going down to the confirm quit, here what we're going to do is we are going to use our function. So we'll say not and not confirm close. Then we will return. So just making use of this confirm close function that we defined above, made it a bit more generic so that we could use it in both closing a tab and closing the application, and that makes our code a little bit cleaner, a little bit shorter as well. That's everything for this video. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.
I believe in energies in the sense I always try to stay positive. I learned quite early in life to cut off negative people. I think the first time I did that with a friend, it was like one big eye-opening moment for me. I was like, I'm fine. Like I can make more friends. He can make more friends. Maybe we just don't connect. So all of these like little learnings, you know, as you like navigate through life.
Hi guys, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be adding another menu just for a quick about page in our application. Let's go down to the bottom of our file, and we're going to add another menu as well as the file menu. We're going to do help menu, and it's going to be another TK menu inside the menu bar. And then we will do menu bar.add cascade, and the menu is going to be the help menu, and the label is going to be help. Then down here, we will also add a command. So the help menu.add command, the label will be about, and the command is show about info. So this is a new function we're going to create just now. Let's create it up here, show about info, and it's just going to launch a message box. So we will say show info, the title is going to be about, and the message is going to be something like this. All right, so just a simple message that can be shown there, and we will use this to show you how to define multiple menus. You can see them up here, file and help, and when you click on it, you get the about. Notice that whenever you add a help menu in Mac, you also get this search. That comes by default with macOS and allows you to perform searches for other menu items inside your application. It can be pretty handy, but if you don't get that because you're not using Mac, that's okay, don't worry about it. This is how you can create multiple menus in your application. Just copy what we had already, add a new one, and it just appears there. And also how you can show an info box with the message box.showInfo. Thanks for joining me in this video. I'll see you in the next one.
And I talk to a lot of AI researchers these days, and right now they see this moment in time as their Oppenheimer moment. They refer to it as that because they're looking to his story to say, okay, we're about to unleash this very powerful technology on the world, and what about the unintended consequences? What do we do about that? But what I find encouraging about the uses of AI in the artistic realm is I think they're going to be powerful tools, but ultimately there's no replacing human creativity. And these models and the way in which they process information, they're all based on human creativity from the past.
Hi guys, and welcome back. One more improvement to our application. At the moment, we've got this whole area in which we can write text. However, as we start going over this available space, you can see that we can scroll, but we cannot see a scroll bar, so we have to add it ourselves. Fortunately, adding a scroll bar is really straightforward. What we have to do is go ahead into the create file function here, and instead of creating just a text area and putting it in the notebook, we are going to create a frame. So we will do container equals ttk.frame, and we will make that child of the notebook. Then we will say container.pack. Next up, we will put the text area inside this container, and we will tell the text area that the side is going to be left. That is so that it takes up all of the vertical space and gets joined to the container on the left, because the scroll bar is going to go on the right. Next up, we're going to say notebook.add, and we will add the container, and notebook select, and we will select the container. Then down here we will do text scroll, and that is going to be a ttk.scrollbar. For this container, the orientation is going to be vertical, and the command, and this is the important part, is textarea.yView. Make sure to not call the yView function, as that is what you can use to modify the y delta of a container. So now that we have our scroll bar there, what we have to do is say text scroll.pack, and the side is going to be right, and the fill is going to be Y. We want the text area to take up the entire vertical space. Finally, we will say text area Y scroll command, make sure to spell this right, is equal to text underscore scroll dot set. So what happens when you scroll the text area yourself is that is going to move the scroll bar. And similarly, when you move the scroll bar, that is going to move the text area. So these two lines here make each component affect the other. Now, doing this means that we've got a couple of bugs in our program now, because the text area is no longer the sole child of the notebook tab. Now we've got a container that has two elements, the text area and the scroll bar. So in our getTextWidget function, we actually have to make a couple of changes. This is going to be called tabWidget, and it is going to then do TextWidget equal to tabWidget.winfo_children 0. All right, so this is another excellent name here. What this does is it goes into the tab widget, which is this frame, and it gets the widget information, and it gets the children of the widget. That is the frame, that is the text area and the scroll bar, and it gets the first one, which is the text area. Then down here, when we do confirm quit, we have to do the same thing. So we will rename this to tab widget, and then we will do text widget equal tab widget winfo underscore children 0 to get the actual text widget as opposed to the frame. Alright, now that we've got that, we can press play and you will see a slight difference. We do have a scroll bar here on the right, and as we do type hello world and we make it scroll, you can see that a scroll bar appears down here. Scrolling with the scroll bar moves the text area, and scrolling the text area moves the scroll bar as well. That's it for this video. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.